Leaving the European Union in October without a deal will plunge the UK into a recession. It's the warning from the country's spending watchdog. It says, the Office of Budget says, no deal scenario would wipe 5% off the UK stock market, lead to a 10% drop in the pound, and all remember that the UK is expected to leave the bloc on October the 31st. Now, but remember, of course, there's a new Prime Minister on the way. We'll know next week whether it's going to be Jeremy Hunt or it's going to be Boris Johnson. If it's Boris Johnson, well, British lawmakers have voted to make it more difficult for Johnson or whoever to force through a no-deal Brexit by suspending Parliament. The concern is this: the front-runner, Boris, would suspend Parliament just at the moment when they have to make a decision. Prorogue is the word they use. The reason is, of course, Parliament has any say at all is due to this lady, Gina Miller. She sued the government and she got a Supreme Court ruling that says Parliament has the last word. And now she's threatening to do it again. Why?
Because as Mrs May tried to bypass Parliament, Mr Johnson, if he becomes Prime Minister, is threatening to close down Parliament. So to deny it its voice, and it is the central pillar of our Constitution. It's the jewel in the crown, if you like, of our Constitution. The Parliament is sovereign and has to be involved in this process all the way through, and especially at the end of the process.
But he has the right to prorogue Parliament.
So proroguing happens every year. It actually happens when Parliament takes a break and then comes back again to have its new business. But to deliberately prorogue Parliament with the aim of closing down the voice is, we feel, illegal.
But surely it's up to Parliament, which has the power to pass resolutions and laws to say you shall not prorogue us to prevent Brexit.
Well, they have to have the opportunity to do that. And today, what we've seen, there was a vote saying that Parliament has to sit a certain days. It didn't specifically say that Parliament can't be prorogued. So when Parliament comes back in September, they will have 20 days to sit between September and the 31st of October. Now, if it looks, we think, out of desperation that there's no way of getting anything through Parliament, then there could be a temptation to close it down so that MPs won't have the opportunity to use their voice and their vote.
Why do you do this? I mean, you're not a politician.
No.
You know, politically active, yes. But why do you do this? Why do you take it upon yourself to take on this charge?
Two reasons. I'm a constitutional geek, if you like, and I'm much more interested in the long-term consequences of this. Because we have an unwritten constitution, the long-term consequences of having a precedent set where a Prime Minister and executive can bypass Parliament is that actually the power would shift. We would move towards a more authoritarian form of government. And that is a real threat to us.
But how much of your movement or your actions is based on constitutional probity versus the fact you are anti-Brexit and you don't want the country to leave the European Union and you'll do what needs may to stop it?
No, because what I'm doing can't do that. All it does is give ministers a voice, and then they will decide what they do with that voice. So all my actions can't tell them what to do. A court couldn't tell them what to do. All it can do is give them their rightful voice in the process. So, for example, if the idea was, if MPs voted for no deal, for example, there's a whole raft of legislation and financial resources that need to be allocated to cushion a no deal outcome.
Right, but
proroguing won't give them the opportunity to do that.
But if no deal looks to be the way forward, will you accept it?
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing we can do about that. If Parliament chooses that as the outcome, that is the democratic process we have in this country.
And within those confines, when Boris Johnson does become Prime Minister, I'm the one who's saying...
I think he will.
Right, thank you. For that, for the purposes of our conversation, let's say he's going to win. What's your biggest fear? He's not a stupid man. He's been Foreign Secretary. He knows his way around the political world.
But he's not a man of detail. And I think that's the problem, is that you have a Prime Minister going in, making promises, painting his own red lines. Do you think he would have learned that you don't put red lines, saying we're going to do or die and leave on the 31st of October, having completely ignored the fact that that extension was on the basis that nothing would be renegotiated. So he's promising things he cannot deliver. So what do you do? How does he live up to that deadline on the 31st of October?
He continually says, as indeed did Jeremy Hunt to a certain extent, but Boris Johnson, he believes that they will move, and it'll still be the old, it'll just be at the worst possible moment between Juncker and von der Leyen. So I assume she'll be heavily involved in the discussions with it because she'll be picking up the mess after the 1st of November.
No, that's not actually what we've heard that's going to happen. We've heard that Juncker will stay on until the end of the year, and that's actually been agreed with the new incoming von der Leyen. So I think that was announced last Friday, that came out of the EU. And I think at the moment, what is they are saying, and if you look at their actions when it comes to withdrawing equivalents in Switzerland that's happened recently, the EU's biggest concern is the unity of the Union and to protect the 4 freedoms. And the pillars will be protected. So it's more about their legacy rather than just one member state.
OK, but that argument or that point has not shifted since day one.
No, it hasn't.
I mean, since the very start of this process. I think I'm asking the wrong person this question, but you may have a thought. What do you think makes Boris think he will get movement?
I think he thinks that his advisors and Boris think that the EU won't want the disruption that they'll see. Because
well, hang on, if they went as far as they did in March, I mean...
They are prepared.
They are. I mean, if anybody... And you speaking to the BBC, you heard Michel Barnier saying that until now we've never even considered, or the UK had never even considered that they would leave without a deal.
So I presented to the Senate in France, and I've been to... Everyone is prepared. Everyone is prepared. And the UK seems to be ignoring this. We are living in some sort of a Alice in Wonderland where we think that we can make the rules, forgetting that actually you've got the EU, you've got a bloc who has to protect its 27 members, and you have WTO with 164 members who have to protect their members. So we are living through this sort of illusion at the moment.
Do you see, and it's nice that we have some extra time to talk about this, do you see that the EU does need to move somewhere, something? So, for example, I mean, I know the new WTO rules that would suggest we could continue trading on those terms, on existing terms, provided nobody objected. There are ways round it.
So Article 24 under WTO is very clear that we can only use that if we are part way to an agreement. And we haven't even started that.
But we could fudge it.
We could fudge it, but it still will take time. And that is the biggest threat here, is if we leave with no deal, we have no transition. So we don't have that 2-year period. And it was very interesting last night because Mr. Johnson was saying we'll have some sort of a rollover period, which he meant the implementation period. So perhaps that's what he will ask for, is that, yes, we are leaving with no deal, but could we please have the 2 years to implement the no deal?
Do you like kippers?
I do like kippers, actually.
I'm afraid they're not Manx kippers, they're Scottish kippers, but they'll be on my breakfast table tomorrow.
But I have to say, the kippers episode last night was interesting.
Why?
Because it was yet another misguided message from Boris, basically a lie. And this is the problem that Boris will have, is that he has spent 30 years saying things about the EU that are not true. And so they are not going to forgive him for that.
It's worked for the US president.
I think the EU 27 may have something to say about it.
Good to see you.
And you.
Love you as always. Thank you.